Very good morning. You're watching Sunrise. Now our talking point today. When a parent has an alcohol problem, what's the effect on their children? Well, that was the theme of a very moving piece written by The Telegraph's associate editor, Camilla Tominey, whose mother was an alcoholic, just yesterday. And she joins us now, along with the Shadow Health Secretary, Jon Ashworth, similarly has personal experience of the issue. Guys, really good to see you. And it's strange because we've obviously chatted so many times, you know, over the past couple of years on politics and so on. Camilla, before we start, I just want to kind of read a couple of the quotes from the article itself. If we can bring up the words from The Telegraph. My name is Camilla and my mother was an alcoholic. She died 17 years ago. But those words still feel like a betrayal, as if I'm giving away my family's worst-kept secret. I remember my father once catching me trying to draw a line on a bottle of Gordon's so I could tell how much she was drinking. I loved her so much. When she was sober, she was one of the funniest, most engaging women you could ever meet. She ended up so unrecognisable that when she was admitted to the hospital for the final time, I had to point out to visitors which patient she was. I mean, Camilla, I'll tell you, I'm struggling to read that.
I know.
So how was it?
Having it read back.
How was it to write it?
Well, I have written about it in the past, and we'll get onto this. And Jon and I have done a lot of work with a particular charity called NICOA, which helps the children of alcoholics. I'd say it's cathartic, but in a way, I don't feel great about having to put it out there because it does feel like a betrayal still, as I said. And I don't want Mum to be thought of just this chronic alcoholic and nothing else, because she was a truly remarkable and amazing woman and certainly contributed to making me the woman I am today. However, she did have a fatal flaw, and that was alcoholism. And there was a conspiracy of silence both within the family and outside it at the time to not really discuss the elephant in the room. And why I'm talking about it is because I think it's the elephant in a lot of rooms, a lot of front rooms in Britain, more than we'd even imagine. You know, there are 2.6 million children who are affected by heavy drinking parents. And I think we've had this national conversation about mental health, but we're not really being honest with ourselves about our own alcohol consumption and its effect on those around us. So
tell us, Camilla, when do you remember first recognising that there was a negative relationship between your parent and the bottle?
Well, I just remember as a child kind of not being able to understand why. When I came back from school, my mother turned into this different person in the evenings. And it was like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality change. And I couldn't get my head around it. And I remember thinking, you know, was it that she was suffering early menopause? I think at one point I thought maybe she's got an undiagnosed brain tumour, there's something wrong. And I kind of subtly asked friends at school, or does your mum behave a bit oddly at night? Does she seem to drink quite a lot? You know, are you sometimes left having to finish off the dinner or do the washing? You know, often my brothers would say, I haven't got any school uniform, and I'd be running around trying to sort everything out domestically. My dad was a GP, and in those days the GPs would go off on call at night, and he worked very, very hard. So there was a sense that something wasn't quite right, but we could never really discuss it. And matters came to a head when I was about 11 or 12, and we had a family holiday to South Africa. We were staying in this lovely hotel in Plettenberg Bay. I remember it vividly. And my dad was taking us out and trying to make the best of a bad situation. But effectively, Mum just did not emerge from the hotel room. I think she was drinking in the hotel room and ordering in drinks. And I think we were all sitting around a board game like Monopoly, and I just said to my brothers, I've got two older brothers, and my dad, you know, Mum's drunk again, what the hell's going on here? And we all finally talked about it.
So it had been unspoken until that point?
It had been kind of alluded to. We used to say, oh, Mum's in a mood, which would be code for Mum's not right, but we never really... Because she was in total denial and you couldn't speak to her about it, and as a child you're very deferential towards your parents, it was something that we kind of like, we almost protected her by keeping it secret. We didn't want to embarrass or humiliate her. We weren't going to start talking about it in the town. You know, my dad was the local GP. This is the other thing, and Jon will talk from a different perspective, but this is something that crosses class boundaries. We think about alcoholics, you know, who are tramps drinking out of paper bags. You know, my mum was hiding bottles in expensive handbags. It's a middle-class problem, it's a working-class problem, it's a cross-class problem that we need to address here.
Yeah. I mean, Jon, tell us a bit about your experience with your dad. I mean, it seems, and also, Camilla talking there about the board games that you're playing, it almost seems sometimes that the parents' alcoholism is expressed in those kind of mundane activities. You know, you've written about your dad coming to school to pick you up and he was drunk.
Yeah, I mean, it coloured my whole upbringing. And I always knew it. There was never there was never that moment or that sort of curiosity that you had to go through. I mean, it was always there. It was always accepted in the family. It was only when I became a teenager that I began to understand how serious it was. But I remember going to the hospital when I must have been about 6 or 7. My dad had been admitted to hospital because he'd been drinking a bottle of whiskey a day. And he was basically told, you've got to stop this, because if you don't stop this, you're going to die. Well, he decided to stop drinking a bottle of whiskey a day. This was when he was in his, would have been sort of late 30s, early 40s. But he just started drinking wine and beer instead. And I remember that as a 7-year-old. So it was always in my life. And I did, when I spoke in the House of Commons about 18 months or so ago, and it was actually a debate on the alcohol in society, and I'd gone along to this debate and I'd written a very sort of worthy speech with all the statistics and all the policies and all the rest of it, and I thought, you know what, I just threw it away. I'm just going to tell my story. And like you were saying, you get a sense of shame because you think you've betrayed the memory of your father.
But you also must. I mean, we all have different relationships and different experiences with our parents, clearly. But I mean, Camilla, you were talking about the woman that your mother was. Now, I know that I hero worship my parents. You know, I love them completely. They are my role models. And actually, thinking about it, I can't really think of anything that would change that completely, that would remove. How do you reconcile, you know, looking up to this person that you rely on, that you owe so much to, and then you must almost on occasion be just ashamed of them as well.
I suppose it rings true, the Philip Larkin poem about parents.
Yeah.
And we take the best things from them and we try and learn from the worst aspects of them. But as a mother, I mean, she was very, very loving. She was a very intelligent woman, really, really beautiful. As I say in that piece, I always like to remember her as 80s mum before the alcohol really took hold. You know, she was the proverbial life and soul of the party, as quite heavy drinking people often are. You know, she had a wicked sense of humour, and she was quite inspirational for me because she very much encouraged me to go out there and make a name for myself. You know, it was unfortunate because she died when I was 23. She didn't know that I became a journalist. She didn't know that I had children. When Jon taught then, you know, when you're younger, you're just used to the situation you've got within your own family.
You don't know any different.
You don't know
really,
any different. You don't have a comparison.
That's
frightening,
right.
Really.
You don't know any different, and we are probably lucky because, as far as I'm aware, domestic abuse, sexual abuse was never part of our households.
No, mine neither, thankfully. But
so many children growing up with an alcoholic parent.
Also, there are children growing up, we've discovered through our work with the National Association for Children of Alcoholics. You know, I thank God I had my dad and my older brothers, and we are now, you know, great things come of terrible tragedy because I'm very close to Dad. My brothers and I have got an exceptionally good relationship because of everything that happened, and equally preparation for being a journalist, expecting the unknown, dealing with difficulties, having to adapt. It's perfect training, really. I mean, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but I've come out of it much stronger. But I was going to say, when we look at some of the case studies, you know, there have been children as young as 5 phoning this helpline because their parents have been too drunk to read them bedside time stories. This is 5-year-olds. We had a buffer. We had other family support. Perhaps I demographically had support because, you know, I was from a comfortable family. There are kids who have got 2 parents who are alcoholics. And they don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn. And this is why it's so important to highlight this issue.
And that's why although I have these contradictory feelings, on the one hand I feel ashamed and I feel like I've betrayed my dad. But on the other hand, you know, when I got this job as Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, you know, obviously I'm going to come on your programme and moan about the state of the NHS under Tories. You know, that, of course I am. But I decided I wanted to use this immensely privileged platform of being a politician in this role to speak out on behalf of children in these circumstances, and to speak out the fact that, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of people in this country who've got an alcohol problem getting no support. All the addiction services have been slashed and cut back. There's going to be more cuts to addiction services next year. And actually, when you look at the figures, you know, alcohol-related deaths are increasing. The number of people being admitted to hospital for alcohol-related conditions are increasing. We're sort of ignoring addiction in society and neglecting it, and I want to do something about that.
I mean, we were talking about this in the break before we came on here, but Jon, why do you think that... I mean, you guys have been incredibly brave and open about your own experiences. That there are... Jon, you were saying, after you spoke in that debate in Westminster Hall, you had email after email, people wanting to share their own experiences. There still seems a reticence to talk about it. We've come awful long way in talking about, for example, problems around mental health. But perhaps people are still uncomfortable talking about experiences similar to yours. Do we know why that might be?
I think people feel It is embarrassing. I think people feel it is shameful. I think people are not honest about themselves. People don't want to face up to the reality that they're drinking too much, or even, you know, abusing other substances. Actually, people don't want to contemplate what they're actually doing to themselves. And you sort of also, the other thing is, you know, when we come on programmes like this and we start talking about some of the policy solutions, there'll be a load of people out there thinking, oh, look, them bores, they want to stop us having a drink, they want to sort of stop us having fun and all that. I mean...
You do get tarred slightly with the kind of spoil sport brush, and I'm teetotal now, and I wrote that in the piece because when I had children, I thought I can never be even as much as tipsy in front of them. I just need to break the cycle. And that's worked for me. But, you know, my friends still drink, my husband still drinks, so do members of my family. I haven't got a problem with that. But I think also there is a bit of dishonesty. People think that it's OK to kind of like finish a bottle of wine a night or go out on a Friday and get legless, and it's part of our culture, you know. At any given moment you have a drink to celebrate or commiserate anything, and that's normalised heavy drinking. And actually heavy drinking isn't normal. It shouldn't be normal. Drink should be taken as a minimum, not as a you know, in excess, and this has been the problem throughout, you know. That's what hides alcoholism as well, because it's socialised.
We are just about to run out of time, but I don't want to end this without asking both of you briefly, just to... If someone is sitting at home watching this interview with parents or a parent or a family member close to them who is an alcoholic, what would you say to them directly?
Definitely visit NACOA, which is nacoa.org, because even if you're an adult child of an alcoholic, you can be helped by the resources there and by speaking to people, and they desperately need funding, don't they,
They do
Jon?
need funding. I've run 2 London marathons for them, and we're actually going to be lobbying the Health Secretary later today to try and get them some extra funding. But more generally, addiction, supporting people with alcohol and drug misuse problems are going to be a big priority of mine as well going forward.
Well, look, on behalf of both of us and everyone else who's been listening in the building, thank you both for coming in and talking about this. Camilla, Jon, it's always good to see you, and thank you so much for this.